The perpetual battle to protect life and the environment. Increased rates of chemical-related diseases and disorders have been one early warning of new man-made chemical hazards. A parallel warning has been seen in the effects of those chemicals on the environment. The environmental effects of toxic manufactured chemicals were first brought to widespread attention through the publication in 1962 of Silent Spring, an iconic book by biologist Rachel Carson. Silent Spring detailed the dangers of artificial pesticides to wildlife, specifically the role of the insecticide DDT in nearly causing the extinction of the osprey and the American bald eagle. Carson's book was hailed by scientists and the media but criticized by the chemical industry and their lobbyists. Concerns about the effects of chemicals on the endocrine systems of wildlife and people that Rachel Carson had noted in Silent Spring were voiced again in 1996 in another pioneer book held the self-explanatory title of Our Stolen Future, Are We Threatening Our Fertility, Intelligence, and Survival? A scientific detective story by Theo Colliborn and colleagues, who coined the term endocrine disruptors to describe how synthetic chemicals could mimic the actions of natural hormones in wildlife and in people. In some instances, industries with deeply vested interests in protecting markets for hazardous chemicals, such as lead, tobacco, asbestos, and chemical pesticides have actively opposed efforts to understand and control humans' exposures to these materials. These industries have used highly sophisticated disinformation campaigns to confuse the public and discredit science. Lobbyists and scientists in the pay of those industries have attacked the expertise and claims of medical professionals, researchers, and environmental scientists who called attention to the risks of emerging technologies and new chemicals, just as they did in previous decades in the case of lead and mercury. Today, industry-sponsored disinformation campaigns are active around chlorinated solvents, organophosphate pesticides, and chemical herbicides. Moreover, the majority of the 3,000 high-production volume chemicals worldwide have not undergone even minimal assessment for safety or potential toxicity for humans and the environment. Only approximately 20% of high-production volume chemicals have been screened for their potential to disrupt early human development or to cause disease in humans. Accordingly, we have no knowledge of the possible dangers to humans' health as a result of most of the synthetic chemicals in the world today. Even less is known about the potential effects of humans' simultaneous exposure to multiple chemicals, or about how chemicals may interact with one another in the human body, possibly causing synergistic adverse effects on health. For decades, the trans-global chemical industries have hampered almost all efforts to achieve effective regulation of chemical substances known or suspected to be harmful to humans' health. This tragic failure had manifested itself in the decision, which was made in the United States, which is the home of the most powerful multinational chemical corporations, in the late 70s of the 20th century to grandfather in and presume safe the 62,000 chemicals that were already on the market, without any requirement for toxicity testing. These chemicals were allowed to remain in commerce unless the authorities made a definitive finding that the chemical posed an unreasonable risk to human health or to the environment. The unreasonable risk standard has been a major barrier to the regulation of industrial and consumer chemicals, as it places the burden of proof on the authorities and eventually the victims to prove harm after a chemical has been released, rather than on chemical manufacturers before the release of a synthetic chemical to the market. This situation resulted in a perpetual status quo in favor of the powerful multinational chemical industries who were able to fend off any efforts by authorities, civil society organizations and victims to raise the alarm regarding the potential risks to humans' health or the environment caused by any given synthetic chemical. So far, out of the tens of thousands of man-made chemicals, only few chemicals are weakly regulated but not prohibited in several countries, mainly in the developed world, but not in the majority of developing nations. These chemicals are polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, chlorofluorocarbons, dioxin, asbestos, and hexavalent chromium. For example, When chemicals are ejected for sale in the European Union due to health and safety concerns, the chemical manufacturers divert the banned chemicals to countries with less rigid standards, which includes the majority of the developing nations. In effect, the poorer countries have become a sort of dumping grounds for products deemed unsafe by Europe and other rich nations. Multinational companies already produce the healthier products that meet the stringent regulations of the European Union, while their unsafe products remain available in the developing countries. The safer products such as phthalate-free toys, cadmium-free computer parts, electronics that do not contain brominated flame retardants, and cosmetics that do not contain phthalates, lead, or other toxic chemicals should be the norm for every nation and society worldwide, not only for the rich ones. Copyright Academy House. www.academy.house